What's up everybody, Unrested back again, and today I can finally film outside today because it's not a horrible day of weather again, which is great. It was just disgusting yesterday. Horrible, cold, wet rain. Well, rain is always wet, isn't it? It's not always cold. So let me let this train pass real quick. Pause. Some people always wonder, like, what's that sound in the background when you're walking? It's train. There it goes. And let me just say thank you to everyone for their responses on these ramble videos. This is what this is now. I should have announced that at the beginning instead of waiting 30 seconds into the video to say, hey, I'm continuing this ramble part 5. Someone suggested a great title. I hadn't really liked calling these ramble, My Life in Japan Week 1 Part 2. Like, I'm not liking that title, so I'm going to go back and retitle all of them into a playlist. And some person suggested The History of Unrested. I liked that one, The History of Unrested, because I mean really that's what it is. I guess you could say it's a biography, but you know, biography has to be super exact usually, well, somewhat exact. And I, like I said before, I don't have all the dates memorized and stuff like that. Like, I'm not giving you exact days or exact dates and times of when this stuff happened, and sometimes I mess up, overlap, or leave information out, and not because I'm trying to mess up the story or make it look different, but mostly just because I can't remember everything, to be quite honest. I told a story about a school 2 rambles back, and I left out a really funny part about how the one job I took, this construction worker who opened up this school, and I turned down that job and took a different one, but my friend took that job, and the pay was really shitty. But I forgot the craziest, most creepiest part of it was that the school eventually got shut down because the dude was a total creeper on the female employees. He was sexually harassing the female employees. He's a totally creepy, weird dude. So I'm really glad I didn't take that job. My friend I remember the stories he was telling me of how disgusted he was with this guy. It's like the comments that he would make to the Japanese or female gaijin staff there. And he said he eventually had to stand up to the guy and be like, look, you just can't talk to people like that. And when he wouldn't listen to that, he eventually helped all the girls start to report sexual harassment, and there was an investigation done, and pretty much they got their own lawyers and everything, and it didn't end up that any kind of police tried to force him to shut it down, but he was pretty much facing enough lawsuits from everybody at the school. And there was so much evidence, because a lot of times when you have these classes, you have people who record classes, or there's cameras in the classroom, because of course there are cases of where either parents are filming a demo lesson, an observation lesson, or the class itself is doing that for the possibility of either commercial or advertisement or marketing purposes, or some schools just have it as safety, security. If a child, says that they were hit or touched in a wrong way, if they have video evidence going through the school the whole day, then they're okay. Recently there was a court case in Korea in which a woman just slapped the hell out of this kid. Oh my god, man, it was horrible to watch. And it was videoed, because they have video cameras in every classroom, and she's in jail now, as she should be. So this was eventually something that put that guy in jail. Well, I'm sorry, it put him in jail. The Korean woman's in jail. He just lost his business. He did not go to jail for that, although really he's the kind of guy who does need to be locked up, or at the very least get some sort of rehab to understand how to properly talk to people. Anyway, but I left that part out, and that was a great part, and I just totally forgot to mention that when I went back, and people commented on the video. I was like, oh, but they didn't even hear the best part. He was so crazy. He was absolutely insane. So unfortunately there's going to be sections like that I just forget and leave out, and that's what I'm talking about when I say I forget certain aspects. I sometimes forget some of the best parts of the stories. Anyway, let me go ahead and sit on over here at my favorite park where I tell smokers to leave. And let's get into our little ramble today, part 5 of my first, at this point we're getting into almost the second year that I'm in Japan. So, as we left our story yesterday, I had just lost my job at a horrible school known as KIS. Due to the fact that they fucked me over at the last second and told me I had a job next year, a contract next year, and then waited till I went all the way through graduation with my kids, and at literally the 11th hour were like, oh wait, we didn't have enough money for a new teaching position, so sorry, you don't have a job next year. So I'm scrambling for a job now. I'm like, what the hell am I gonna do? Luckily for me, I'm pretty good at interviewing, I have to say. Pretty good at writing up resumes, being pretty professional about it. Usually when I don't have a job, I make my job finding a job. I wake up at 9 a.m. I wake up at 6 or 7 or 8 a.m., start my job at 9 a.m., filling out resumes, making resumes, cover letters, sending them out, and just pretty much do that like a full, 8-hour job, or until I get a job, or until I start to get a lot of callbacks on jobs for interviews. That's my advice to anyone. If you're unemployed and you are complaining about you don't have a job, well, your job needs to become getting a job. To sit around and complain about it while 8 hours of your day is taken up by computer games or just surfing the web, well, you don't really have reason to complain. Then you only have yourself to blame. When you don't have a job, make finding a job your job. That's my advice. So that's what I did, and that's what I got into, and I started to get some callbacks, and I was kind of still stupid about this again. I pretty much jumped on one of the first jobs I took. Well, I had kind of a reason for it. It was because when I first heard about the job, the guy was talking about that I would teach kindergarten. I did enjoy teaching kindergarten. As bad as that experience was at my last school that was international, teaching the kids was fun. Teaching the classes was fun. I enjoyed the interaction with the students. I enjoyed the teaching level. I enjoyed the level of English they had. And that's what this guy said. He said, oh, you'll be teaching English for kindergartners here too if you join. And I was like, oh, okay. And it turned out to not quite be exactly what he said. It was pretty different, actually. So it's kind of a unique situation. These kind of companies exist, but they're a little more rare. So what this was a company that only taught kindergartens that were either public school kindergartens, colloquial kindergartens, or private kindergartens. And the way they did this was you were pretty much a travel English teacher. They would order you up like you would order, someone to come and do a demo at your place or someone to come and do a show at your place. You would order them up like that, and then they would come out to your school for 45 minutes to up to 2 hours if you had more than one class, maybe even longer if there was multiple classes they wanted you to teach while you were there. And they would go from class to class doing this English lesson. And these English lessons included you carrying like tons of stuff with you, tons of props and everything so that you could teach these lessons, which, I always like to make mine as fun as possible, so I'd be carrying tons of junk, all different types of games and stuff like that. But there's just this real disconnect with this job where you're this guy who dresses up in an orange shirt to show up to the job to do it. They literally never learn your name because you're at a new school every week. Your schedule changes every week. You're not paid while you're traveling. You're not paid if there's downtime in between schools you're going to. So imagine you have one school that you're going to in the morning and the lesson's only 45 minutes. And then you have another school that you're going to in the afternoon and the lesson's only 45 minutes, but you have 6 hours in between that time. Well, you've just worked 8 hours because you're away from home for that amount of time, and you're so far away from your home, you don't have enough time to like travel all the way back and travel all the way to the next job. So you're just out and about with like this like nomadic kind of lifestyle, waiting for your next job to start, and you're only getting paid for 2 hours. So that was one thing that was not explained to me when I took this job. It was a really bad idea to have taken this. The way I was talked to was that I'd be teaching kindergarten, and I said, like, is it a full-time job? And they're like, yeah, I mean, you'll be working 8 hours a day. Well, that was bullshit. You will be out of your house for 8 hours a day. You won't be necessarily working, and you won't be necessarily making money. So you got to be really careful, really read into your contracts. Again, I blame myself for being naive, for just believing that, someone wouldn't try to screw me over. As it's happened before. Don't get me wrong, I've had just as many good jobs that treated me really well in Japan. But I have had the bad ones too, because like I said, a lot of stuff can be getting away with just due to the fact that when you try to file a complaint with the labor board, they do pretty much nothing about it. You know, they see gaijin mostly as transient, and by transient I just mean like going to go home soon. And so why should they follow up on any of the reports that gaijin makes, since a new gaijin will be there to replace them at any time. So, moving on from there, I worked that job for a little bit, and right away knew it just wasn't for me. You know, I was out of my house for a huge amount of hours through the day and getting paid for very few, and that wasn't cutting it for bills. I was just like, fuck this. On top of it, I couldn't believe this aspect. The owner had his wife do the what am I trying to say? The paychecks. Okay, so he had her in charge of dishing out pay, and I don't know why she thought this was okay, but she would just be like 2 to 3 days late with pay. And like, you know, I had just gone through Nova crashing where my pay didn't come for 2 to 3 days and then the place went bankrupt. So I was real nervous about situations like that. I was like, what's going on here? Like, where's my pay? And they're like, oh, don't worry, it's gonna be in the bank. Like, you know, it's just a little late. Like, we just haven't done it yet. And I'm like, well, I mean, I got rent due. You know, like, your pay is supposed to come on either the 15th or the 30th at most jobs, sometimes the first two. But usually it comes one time a month in Japan. You don't get like bi-weekly or anything like that. You only usually get paid one time a month. And, you know, I'd have things like rent due and stuff. I'd be like, well, what, you know, they automatically take the rent out of my bank account. What are they going to do when the rent's not there? They're like, well, you know, just make sure you save up a lot in between paychecks. And it's like, yeah, I could if I was getting those paychecks on time. And, I remember that, like, when I quit right away, like, they're like, well, why would you want to suddenly quit? I'm like, well, number one, you're not paying us for 8 hours a day. We're getting paid shit money. And number two, your paychecks are late. And I remember the owner, and, like, they were both gaijin. It was a gaijin guy from Canada and a Korean woman. He had met her in Korea and married her, and they'd moved over here and started a company in Japan. And he couldn't believe, he was like, really? You just upset that, like, I paid people late? I'm like, yeah, dude, I went through the Nova crash. Are you fucking crazy paying people late who went through that? Like, you know, they're on edge, man. We got PSTD from that shit, you know? I mean, you know, I'm obviously, you know, using hyperbole. I'm not actually thinking it's that extreme, and no offense to people who do have PSTD, it's very serious. But I mean, seriously, take into account that other people have been screwed over in Japan. It has happened, not just with Nova, but other companies. So if you don't want to be seen as one of those companies that will screw people over, pay them on time. I heard later, though, he had yelled at his wife for not paying people on time after that because more people started to quit, and she was really taken aback that people would be that upset that paychecks were late. Yes, people get upset when their paychecks are late, you fucking idiot. Jesus Christ. I would never, if I ever had my own company with multiple employees, I would never, ever, even if I wasn't going to be paid, I would make sure they got paid on time. So, right away, that job only lasted a couple months. Really, it was by monthly contract anyway, so I wasn't really screwing anyone over too big on that one. I just didn't want to re-sign. And I finally got a bit more into dating as I finally, I secured an ALT job. That's what finally allowed me to get back into dating, because once I secured the ALT job, number one, I had a lot more free time, because those of you who've worked ALT know you have a lot more free time. Number two, my income became more steady, because even though ALT doesn't pay that well, it still pays enough that you can survive off of it if you've gone with the right company. But it's still kind of a little bit sketchy, and I'll let you know about that. But first, I want to get into some of the dating stories, because yesterday I ended my video by saying next one I'm going to go into dating stories, and people seemed like really stoked on that. They were like, yes, dating stories, get into it. Okay, so 14 minutes in, here we go. I'm finally getting into the dating stories. Way to go, Scott. Some of these dating stories you may have heard before, and I just want to kind of give a warning before we get started here. Obviously, I dated females, okay? Not that there's anything wrong with anybody dating anything else of any other sex. But this is gonna be my perspective of the craziest dates, okay? Mind you, I dated quite a few totally normal, mundane, everyday, like, okay, great, average, above average women. It just didn't work out, okay? I'm married now, so obviously that time of my life is over. But the ones I'm going to tell you are only the craziest ones. If I told you the most boring ones, where it was like, yeah, we met up, we had a cup of coffee, we realized, we just weren't right for each other and never met again, you don't want to hear that story because I've just told the whole thing right there in that very short sentence. You want to hear the crazy stuff, let's be honest, okay? And that's what I'm telling you. I am not judging all women by these crazy stories that I'm telling you, okay? There are crazy fucking men out there too. There are asshole men out there. There are creeper men out there. There's all types from both sexes, okay? I'm not trying to be sexist here. I'm not trying to be a chauvinist here. I realize these aren't gonna paint these girls in the best light. And I realize in the past, I wasn't always the best boyfriend. I made a bunch of fuck-ups and mistakes, and I wasn't always the greatest guy, and I didn't always treat the girls perfectly, and I could have been more mature with how I handled relationships. That being said, I'm still gonna tell these fucking crazy stories. If you still wanna judge me and call me chauvinist, anti-feminist or whatever, do whatever you want, but fuck off at the same time. Okay, so craziest dating stories. I guess, who do I start with? I don't have like a massive amount. I did date quite a bit though. Pretty much I hit a point where like I started to really learn about how to meet girls in Japan. It was a little bit different than America in the sense that girls are not as open to asking you out as they are in America. I'm not saying American girls are aggressive, but they are braver in the sense that they can initiate a date. They can be like, hey, would you want to get coffee sometime? Or hey, would you want to do this? That'll almost never happen in Japan. It's pretty rare. The guy would almost 100% of the time have to initiate everything with talking with a girl. And for that to happen, I had to know enough language, and I had to know how to approach a date, like in a way, be like, what kind of things do Japanese girls even want to do on the first date? Like, where do they want to go? Is asking them to go to a bar too direct, or is asking them to just go to a movie too boring? Like, you've got to figure out what's fun in Japan for Japanese girls. And after I started to understand that, that's when I got a bit more open to meeting more girls, setting up more dates, and getting to know the different personalities that are Japanese girls, because obviously they vary quite a bit from the Western counterpart. This is due to multiple factors. This is due to cultural, traditional, the way they're raised, nurture and nature, everything and anything from who your parents were. And so to go into that would have to be a whole nother ramble video. I don't have time for it now. Let's just say they're different. Okay. And so at first I was just going on dates by like, I'd meet a girl here, I'd meet a girl there, maybe I'd, like one time, I guess I'll start with this date first for one of my crazy ones. This is one I met on a train one time. Very simple to meet a girl just even on a train. And I don't suggest that you like go up and start trying to talk up every girl on the train, but for this one, the only reason I talked to this girl, and I didn't have the idea of initiating a date, I just had the idea of starting up a conversation. She was a cute girl. I had seen her every day, and I noticed every day she was reading a new English book. And one day, she was reading the book A Walk to Remember. I remember this, because I thought, oh man, that was a bad movie, A Walk to Remember. And I knew the book had been made into a movie, so I just commented on it. I'm like, oh, I see you're reading A Walk to Remember today. And she's like, yeah, do you know this book? And I was like, yeah, I know the movie. I haven't read the book. And she's like, it's a movie? I'm like, oh yeah, you didn't know it got turned into a movie and stuff? And so I told her about how it got made into a movie, and that, I think, wasn't it Mandy Moore was in that movie? God, Mandy Moore, does she sing or do anything anymore? Anyway, getting off on a tangent. And so we started to talk about that, and then this was totally out of the blue. Like, you wouldn't, some people probably won't even believe this story when I tell them, because even to me now, when I tell the story back to myself and I listen to it, I'm like, did this really happen? Okay, so we both get to our stop, and we're both getting off at the same stop on the train. And I've seen her every day on this job that I'm working, this ALT job. And she's like, I'm really glad you talked to me today. She could speak English, by the way, so this is all in English. She's like, I'm really glad you talked to me today, because today is the last day that I'll be riding this train. And I had seen you on the train before, and I wanted to talk to you. And today, since it was my last day, I was actually going to hand you this note before we both left. And I was like, oh, really? She's like, yeah, I was too scared to hand it to you before, but now that you initiated a conversation with me, I wanted to hand you this note. And
just see what you thought. And I was like, okay, cool, cool. And um, so we went our separate ways, and I opened up this note, and it was pretty surprising. It was like her phone number, her phone email, like how to message her, how to contact her, that she had seen me on the train before, that she wanted to know if I'd ever want to go out. So I guess, well, maybe I should take that back. I guess, in a sense, she kind of initiated the date. So maybe some Japanese girls are more brave because she kind of initiated it. I mean, I took the chance to talk to her, which gave her the bravery to hand me the note. Well, I don't know. That could be argued. Anyway, I will say it was brave of her. I don't know if I would do that if I would see a girl on a train that I liked and hand her a note. I would probably just try to talk to her first because I'd feel like handing her a note is like kindergarten type stuff. But anyway, she gave me this note, and I'm reading it on my way while walking to work, and it's like, hey, I saw you on the train before, and I wanted to talk to you, but I was a little bit too nervous, but today's my last day on this train, and if you ever want to see me outside of this train, give me a call or message me at this email, and let's have coffee or something sometime. Let's meet up for a meal. And I was like, oh wow, okay, cool. So I mean, she was all right. Like she's pretty cute. She like had a cute laugh and stuff, and a nice smile. Obviously I didn't know a lot about her yet from just talking for like 10 minutes on the train or something. Sorry, I got like a bunch of sleep in my eye. It's making it like blurry to look at the camera. Okay, there we go. So I was like, all right, I'll give this a chance. That's pretty cool, man. Like, she's already been checking me out, and I was checking her out, so there's a bit of a mutual feeling there. I think we can go into this feeling like both parties are interested. So I give her a call. I say, how about this weekend we hang out? She's like, yeah, that's cool. I'd definitely like to do that. We're just gonna like meet up. I think just go get a bite to eat. Did we see a movie too? I think we actually rented a movie and watched it back at my place. I can't remember what the movie was. Can't remember what it was. Can't remember. I think it was something really stupid, like Aliens versus Predator or something. I hadn't seen those movies because they'd come out when I was moving to Japan. This Part 2, Aliens versus Predator Part 2. Horrible movie, by the way. I love Aliens. I love Predator. I love them both a lot. Like, I really, really like those monsters a lot. And those just horrible movies. Anyway, not a great date movie, but whatever. It doesn't matter. So, God, those birds are loud. Listen to those birds. They're loud. Anyway, so we have this date, and I'm pretty stoked that this is gonna happen. I'm waiting to meet up with her, and I meet her out at the station. That's right. I go down the Mirosuji line out in Nipponbashi and meet her out there. God, they're loud. They're so loud I can barely hear myself talk. And when I go to meet her, right away the first thing she does is hand me this card. And I'm like, oh, this is cool. Like, what's this card? And she's like, I made you this card. And I was like, oh, cool. Like, I haven't had anybody make me something already on the first date. Like, I've had girls make me stuff before. That's cool. Like, make me art. I'm gonna move. This is getting too hard to talk here. Really annoying, man. Like, background, I hope that's not messing up the sound of the video. Anyway, so I get this card, I open it up, and I'm like, all right, what's this? And to my surprise, I open it up, and inside there's pictures of me and her. And you're like, well, wait, Scott, isn't this the first date? Like, how could there be pictures of you and her? Exactly, my thoughts too. After meeting me, I don't remember if I ever told her my full name. I guess, no, I emailed her, so she had my email. So I guess using my email, which my email is Scott M. Ackerman. I'm not going to say at what, but anyway, she got my name from that, and I guess she did a Google search on it, and found all my social networking and everything, which is okay. I mean, people have pretty good access to it now, due to the fact that my YouTube's gotten more popular. But at that time, I had things like MySpace, I had Facebook, I had, I don't have MySpace anymore, by the way. I think, did I even still have like a live journal and stuff back then? I can't remember. Anyway, she found everything, and she printed out the pictures of me from those different social networking sites. Like, she clicked on my profile. They're usually public profile. I don't privatize much. She printed all of them out, cut the pictures out, and then printed out pictures of herself and cut those pictures out, and then put them together. Like, there's like one, I remember one where I'm like holding a wine glass, and I was like talking to somebody, and she cut it out and like put herself next to me with a picture of her holding a bottle of wine. Like, she had poured it for me, and I was drinking the wine she had poured. There was like another one where I was sitting at a table like eating, and she had cut me out there and then put her at the other end of the table, and she's eating with me. Like, so and like, that's why I said when I tell this story, even when I hear it back to myself now, I'm like, did this really happen? I still have the card. I actually had the card even when I got married, and when I moved into my wife's house at the time, I was going to throw the card away. And my wife was like, "What's this?" And so I told her the whole story, because I don't try to keep anything from my wife at all from my past. I try to let her know everything. And she's like, "This is too funny." She's like, "This poor girl. Like, why would you throw away her card?" She's like, "Keep this card forever. This is beautiful. Keep this." Like, and she actually kept the card, so I still have it somewhere in the house. I'll show you to at some point. It's kind of fallen apart at this point just due to the time, how long it's been since that date was, but I still got it. And so it was like this long poetic letter to me about, "Scott, I'm so happy I met you on the train, and I think we're gonna have a beautiful relationship together. Can't wait for what we have in the future." And yeah, I think she was a nice girl. Like, I think she had nothing but good intentions. But this was a little too much for me on the first date. I'm gonna be honest with you. Like, I didn't see myself settling down for a while yet still on this first date, so that was a bit much, and there wasn't a second date after that. Also, okay, so like I said, she was a very nice girl, but she was like super immature for her age. Like, she was almost the same age as me. I think she's only a year or two younger at most. She must have only been like 3 years younger at most. So that would have been like 25 at the time when I was 28. But I remember she acted like a brand new teenager. Like, that was kind of her personality, and that kind of turned me off a bit, I'll be honest. In general, I either date women that are as mature as me or more mature than me, because I already feel like I'm pretty immature to begin with. So I feel like if you're more immature than me, then you must be really, really immature. So yeah, that kind of turned me off from that. And, you know, like, she was a sweet girl, and I think she was really looking for something super serious, like this kind of fantasy sweep her off her feet type of relationship, and I knew I couldn't give her that. So I let that one go, let that catch get away. But that was a very interesting first date. She was overall like a pretty sweet girl, but like, just her goals in life and like where she was headed and like her dreams and studies and things like that just weren't, they were at the level of a teenager's. Like I said, like, she didn't see herself like getting a job anytime soon, or moving out of her parents' house, or any kind of future career for herself, or like all different types of stuff. So that was just that. You know, I was looking to be getting more and more serious with all those aspects of my life. So I just knew that we just weren't going to be connecting at the same time in our life. So then moving on from there, what's the next crazy date I had? Oh, okay, so I dated one girl one night. Just on a whim, I met her at a club. It was actually like a like trance, or like dubstep trance and breakbeat club. So not something I normally go to. Not that I like those kinds of music. I just don't really ever go to those kind of clubs. And I met her there, and it's kind of weird. Whenever you go to a club in Japan, no one actually really dances much at the club. I mean, maybe they do in Tokyo, like Roppongi and stuff. I bet it gets pretty wild. But for the most part, you either have like this group of people who sway back and forth, or just everyone stands around and listens to the music, which is okay. I'm not really Mr. Dance. Let's put it that way. I'm not. I dance like a forklift. I dance horrible. I have no good moves. So she was just chilling there, and I just went over and talked to her, because it's an appropriate place. Of course, it's very appropriate. You go to a bar or a club, you can talk up a girl, and you know, as soon as if you find out she's not interested, so what? Move on, right? And you know, I wasn't opposed to doing such. I thought she was cute. She had this very hipster look to her. I always like the kind of really short cut on a girl. And so that drew me to her right away. I really like shortcuts on girl and stuff like that. So I walked up to her, and I was talking her up and everything, and she was like, hey, how's it going? And like, she wanted to leave with me at the club that night, and I was like, oh, okay, wow, all right, let's hang out, let's go somewhere else. So I think we went to a bar and drank a little bit, and then she was talking to me about how, like, her dreams and stuff of the future. And her dreams and stuff of the future were just like, she worked at a clothing shop, I remember. And I was like, well, you know, you work at a clothing shop now. Like, what are your dreams of the future? She's like, no, I'll probably just always work at a clothing store or working retail. And I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. And I was like, well, I mean, like, what are your biggest dreams? Like, what are your life goals? And she's like, oh, well, I want to be like a mother and start a family. And I was like, yeah, but like, you know, beyond that, like, you can be a mother and start a family, but still have like a big career goal or like a big life goal. Because, like, you know, I look at my own mother and she started a family and still went really far in her career and had all these other goals. She's done all this other stuff. I mean, even now she tackles like new hobbies and stuff at her age. And she's like, no, no, that's it, that's it. And I was just like, oh, okay. And we had a pretty good night. We hung out. Like, I felt a little bit of a connection to her, but probably not enough to see her a second time. So, you know, I didn't initiate anything more than that. Like, I didn't say, well, like, you know, I think maybe I gave her my phone number or gave her my email and just said, you know, call me if you have time or something like that, or let's hang out again, or, you know, let's just meet up as friends or something. Like, nothing super romantic. I didn't, like, you know, give her some sort of like romantic Romeo and Julio kiss. Really, Romeo and Juliet, Romeo and Julio. That's a different type of play. I didn't give her some like magnificent kiss at the end of the night and end it. You know, I just let her down and just said, let's meet up again sometime, or let's hang out if you want to and just chat. Because she was fun to chat to, and I remember her knowledge of music was really large. So it was like the first Japanese person I had met in Japan that like knew all these like Indian underground bands, like even like some of the metal bands I knew and stuff. So I was pretty surprised by that. I hadn't met anyone like that yet. But she sent me this message afterwards that was like, you are my dream guy. You are like the ultimate type of guy I want to marry and everything. And mind you, the reason it's worded like this is because English is not her first language, so she's doing the best she can. I'm not trying to mock her wording of these sentences that she's sending to me, because this is a person who's, you know, English as a second language. If I tried to send her something in Japanese, it would probably sound pretty goofy, but this one just, she just poured her heart out to me that like she had met like the man of her dreams, that I was everything she ever wanted in a guy, and that she could really see herself getting married to me and having kids with me, and like, would I ever think about getting married to her and stuff? And I was just like, whoa, this was like the first date and we didn't even like kiss, man. Like, what's going on, man? Like, I gotta get to know you before I even think about dating you, let alone marry you. My God. And like, so that sent me running right away. There was not a second date after that. So let's see. I've already covered two pretty crazy ones there. You know what I think I'm gonna do? I'm going to end it up here. I'm going to wrap this one up with talking a little bit about ALT work. And then I'll save two more. I think I got two more kind of crazy date stories that I can save for the next part. So let's just jump into ALT. That was the job I started at this time when I got let go from KIS or whatever it was, and then worked at the other company for a very short time, signing small 1-month contracts, and then finally I latched on to ALT because, like I said, that seemed to provide me enough pay to survive yet have a lot of free time. Anyone who works that job will admit right away, ALT gives you a ton of free time. It is one of the easiest jobs you'll ever work. I'm not going to even slightly pretend for a second that you are worked hard at an ALT job. You work from 8 o'clock till about 4:30, sometimes maybe till 5. Maybe someone will hold you till 5, I don't know. But during that time, maybe you'll teach 2 classes, maybe 3, 5 on a super crazy day, and the rest of the time you can literally just sit at your desk and partake in whatever hobbies you have. Most schools won't give you any kind of busy work or anything to fill that time. I have heard of some that do, like make you cut out flashcards and stuff like that. If they want to do that, that's fine. You should still do the work. Also, if those schools ever ask you to help with cleaning time, just go help and clean. Come on, man. While with the, you know, meld with the wa and the harmony of the Japanese workplace. Just do what you're asked to do, you know? No one's asking you to jump off the top of the building. So this job, this ALT job, which is assistant language teacher, is pretty much a job in which you assist the English teachers at that school. And so that's kind of the funniest thing right there to even start off with, is to call them English teachers at those schools. Junior high schools have their own English teachers, so do high schools. And the first thing I'm going to tell you is most of those teachers who are quote-unquote English teachers do not speak English. They cannot speak English. They cannot even speak fluent sentences, or proper grammar, or words above the most, K-level words in America. So already you're getting kids taught by teachers who can't do what they're teaching. So that's the first way you'll see that. That's why Japan never really learns English. This is probably my all-time motto for ALT learning is if you want to understand why Japan never learns English, work ALT. And then you'll understand why this country will forever never speak English if they continue to teach in this way. There's no such thing as immersion in Japan, unless you go to an international school, in which case the kids are forced to speak in English 24/7. In normal public schools, high schools, colloquial schools, in which they hire out an assistant language teacher, an ALT, there is no such thing as immersion. Maybe there might be some sort of experimental school in which that goes down, but I have not heard about it. And if you do know about something like that, please put it in the comments below. I'd love to take a look at something like that. But as far as I know, as far as I've taught, as far as my friends I know who have taught ALT, no one has ever seen a school that can actually speak decent English. And there's multiple reasons for that. Number one, the government forces you to teach from these books. Usually on the junior high school level, it's a book called The Crown. And on the elementary school level, it's a book called Hi Friends, which used to also be known as Eigo no To. And both of those books do a piss poor job at teaching relative English, and by relative I mean modern day, everyday, useful English that people actually speak on the street. Instead, they teach these long-winded sentences that are obsolete. They teach words that are obsolete, like long time no see. Who says long time no see? I know people use it for a translation of hisashiburi, but sometimes you just don't need a translation. Sometimes you just need another word entirely, okay? So that's a few of the problems. Some of the other problems are most of the stuff that they do teach in these schools are based around writing. And writing, there's nothing wrong with actually writing out sentences and learning to write proper grammar and learning to build a sentence in English by writing it. The problem comes is when all you do is write, you never learn to speak. If you sit down and study Japanese and learn how to write 2,000 kanji over a year, but never ever speak any of it, you will not be able to speak any Japanese. Like, you will, at the most, be able to say things like sayonara and arigato, and that's it. You will not understand what other people are saying. You will not be able to speak like a native speaker, or sound like you know what you're talking about, or choose the correct words, or conjugate properly, or use the proper superlatives, or things like that. You will sound awful. You won't be able to speak the language. And that's what happens when you only write a language. When you memorize how to write a language, you do not learn how to speak a language. And that's one thing Japan doesn't seem to understand. And that's one thing you'll come to understand from teaching ALT. Other funny things about teaching ALT. Number one, like I've said before in the past, when you teach junior high schools and elementary schools and you've watched anime about Japan, you realize all those schools that they showed in those anime are exactly like how schools are in Japan. They look like that, they're built like that, the backgrounds look like that. Even if you see things like, oh, well, those schools look so beat up and the paint's chipping and the doors are like the wooden doors that slide back and forth look beat up, and well, that's the way they are. Like, the government barely takes care of these schools. Like, they let them get beat down. They don't do a lot of renovations on it. They don't have big school budgets or anything like that. The teachers work insane hours but get paid very little for how long they work. The school kids are pretty unruly at this point. Japan is not this country of super well-behaved kids like everybody imagines from, I guess, older Japanese movies, because there was a time when Japan was super strict on kids. There's actually an incident which changed that quite a bit. I've covered it in a past video, in which one time a kid was late for school and the school coach, who usually is the enforcer of discipline, was closing the school gate, which rolls close. It's a giant metal gate that rolls close, usually on a kind of a sliding grid. And he was pulling that thing shut, and I don't know how exactly it went down, but this kid tried to jump into the school at the last second, and his head got slammed in between the gate and the stone wall. And I don't I've heard that he died. Um, I mean, you'd really have to slam a gate damn hard on somebody's head to kill them. But apparently he died. If nothing else, he was severely injured or put into a coma or something really bad happened. And ever since then, schools are not strict anymore. They're actually just the opposite. They actually are far too nice, if you ask me, the way they let students walk all over them at some of these schools. I can't believe it. I don't know. I went to a strict Catholic school my whole life, so I'm used to pretty strict teachers that you feared. You feared them. Um, so teaching those jobs were great. I think one of the great thing about those jobs, though, I'm talking about a lot of negatives right now, but one of the great things is, number one, you learn Japanese a lot faster because no one can speak English. You're forced into speaking it. You're learning the way in which the Japanese should learn English. You're learning by immersion. You're being forced to be immersed in the language. Even the English teachers usually can't speak decent English or much English at all, so you're forced to communicate via Japanese. You learn the wa and the harmony of the Japanese workplace because that is a very Japanese-only environment. They're not going to create new rules for you, the gaijin. You're going to have to settle into those rules that they already have at that school that may have been established for up to 50 years or more. You'll start to learn all the different habits, the way schools work, classes work. If you decide to eat the school lunch, you'll get into a lot of different types of Japanese foods that you'll start to learn to like even more. You'll learn why kids act certain ways they do, why adults eventually do in the process of growing up that they go through in Japan, and how they learn kanji in what order, how many they're learning each year. There's all these great things you can learn from it. So there's so many positives. I'm not going to down talk the job and say it sucks. It doesn't suck. ALT teaching doesn't suck. The thing that sucks is unreasonable goals by parents sometimes for kids to learn English because the school doesn't set you up with the tools to do that, and you're forced into this very small box of tools to use because, like I said, the government gives you books that you need to stick to. Most of the times also is these kids are just memorizing words because they have to pass entrance exams, and so they're just memorizing a certain amount of words that they're going to use later to get into these different schools that they like, and they don't really care if they actually retain any of the English you teach them. I guess speaking about the coach, like I said before, the coach is at the school, and like you're saying, Scott, well, what do you mean by the coach? I mean like the physical ed teacher, the PE teacher. Be careful not to mess this up. There's Kocho Sensei, and Kocho Sensei is the principal of the school, okay? He's not the coach. The coach, when I say coach, I mean coach, okay? He's the physical ed teacher. He is the disciplinary person of the school. Most times you do not see a principal who gets up and whoops ass, okay? You don't see a principal who gets up and really screams at kids. Some schools have that. Some schools have very, very strict principals. Oftentimes, though, you'll see him dish out that work to the vice principal. But oftentimes, the true enforcer of the hardcore law of the school is the coach. And the funniest thing, though, always is almost every school I ever taught at, number one, the coach was the most physically unfit person in the school. Like, most Japanese people are in good shape. They've got great bodies. Women up in the years of 50, 60, 70 years old have flat stomachs here, for God's sakes. I mean, this country stays in shape. But this dude would have like a beer belly. He would also smoke at almost every school I went to. The coach would be the only person who smoked. Go outside, take a smoke break like every 15 minutes, it seemed like. He'd be the most out of shape. But he'd also be like the biggest dude at the school. Surprisingly, they were big dudes. They make me look small. They were such big Japanese guys. So anybody that tells you all Japanese people are small, that's bullshit. Don't believe that lie. Things like sumo wrestlers totally make that idea obsolete. Maybe there was a time after World War II where they were a very poor country and food was scarce, where Japanese people were growing up very small because of malnutrition. That's not true anymore. Don't believe those lies anymore. Those are lies. Those are stereotypical myths. The coaches were big dudes. They were usually sometimes ex-judo. Some were some sort of ex-martial arts. Or into something else that always required them to be a big dude. I remember one guy was an ex-shot putter, which is, if you don't know what that is, that's in track where you throw that big metal ball. One guy was an ex-judo coach. He was massive. You would never want to mess with this guy. and they were all like the most out of shape, super fat, like smoking dudes. It was funny. Um, so just a really interesting aspect of ALT work, which I guess I can get into more ALT work. I worked for one company only, but at 3 different schools, because usually each year, like I've said before, they re-sign you to a new contract, and you usually end up changing schools due to those contracts, because what happens in Japan, the way they get around these pretty much scams that these third-party contracts pull, is that, and the schools are with these scams too. Okay, so if a third-party company hires you for a school, they can do it for 3 years at one school. Sometimes less than that, like 1 year, and that's why you have to switch contracts. And if they go over past that time of whatever the government issues a third party can hire out, then the school itself has to hire you. And if they hire you after that, then you have to go on government benefits and stuff like that. You get the same benefits that teachers have, which they have pretty decent benefits. You start to get stuff like paid vacation, you start to get, entered into their pension plan, you start to get entered into their national health insurance, which a lot of these third-party contracts actually try to scalp off of your plan. And probably a lot of people don't know that. Be careful of that. If you work more than something like 35 hours a week, you should be part of national health insurance. And if you're not, then your company is scamming you. And you can report them to the labor board, or at least report them to the government office. And they might actually do something about that, because the government's losing money when they do that. They try to sign you up for some kind of bullshit private. They'll be like, oh, don't worry, we don't give you national health insurance, but we got this special private insurance with our company. Fucking bullshit. You better check that private insurance. It better be goddamn good insurance. So check that kind of stuff out. Don't get screwed over. And, be ready that they're going to scalp off your summer and winter pay sometimes. They're going to just totally pocket your paycheck, even though you're the one who convinced the school to hire you. Because, yeah, they find you. That third party finds you. But really, the school makes the final decision. So they've made a decision to hire you based on your skills, the way you look, the way you act, the way you teach. And that's why that third party is getting money. And then they're taking even more money from each paycheck that you get, and from your paychecks that you get in the summer and winter break, which you should be getting paid for, but they just take off. Anyway, that's a little bit of a look into some of my crazy dates, and my ALT teaching, and a little bit more spiced up in there. This story was kind of all over the place. I like when I stay on a pretty steady pace, and I hope I do with most of these. I'm trying to get better and better at this storytelling stuff. I'm still kind of my first step into this whole long ramble stuff. I'm not used to making these super long videos. I mean, God's sakes, we're almost into 50 minutes on this one. I had quite a bit to cover. My next one will cover some more crazy dates. I got 2 or 3 more crazy dates to get into. More stuff with ALT at some of the craziest ALT schools I've worked at, which I've covered a little bit in the past with like my craziest students or my craziest classrooms. There's still certain aspects of those that I haven't talked about, which I can definitely get into. And on top of that, I guess I'll start to finally get into getting closer to settling down in Japan, what it was like to finally settle down. And even when I settle down, even when I start to get into that part of my history and my life and my story, there's at least one more crazy job I can think of that I worked. And there's kind of a crazy betrayal by a friend that gets thrown in there later down the line too. I guess that's one of the other crazy events that happened in my life long after I got married. So there's a lot more. There's a lot more that I can do with the history of Unrested, as someone titled this, and which I will now change it to. Thank you to whoever left that comment. I can't remember a commenter's name off the top of my head. Sorry. But I will definitely go back and change all these, make it a playlist. I think I'm going to throw it into the playlist known as Get to Know Unrested, which there is already one video just called Get to Know Unrested. It's kind of like a synopsis of my personal history. Very different from these videos. If you want to watch that, it's more based on sophism and hyperbole and just making fun of kind of how I got here. So anyway, I am Unrested. If you like what you saw here today, please like, comment, and subscribe, and look forward to the next ramble video of the history of Unrested.